Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we're both very excited to be talking to you about a new release, Paul Giamatti vehicle, The Holdovers.
You just earned yourself a detention, sir. Me with you is already one big detention. Son of a...
Sir, I don't understand.
That's glaringly apparent.
I can't fail this class.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Mr. Coates. I truly believe that you can.
Every year at Barton Academy, students, faculty, and staff depart the campus for a 2-week winter break. But there are always an unfortunate few who have nowhere to go for the holidays. They're known as the Holdovers.
Mr. Hunnam.
Hello, Mary.
I had you guys stuck with babysitting duty this year. How'd you manage that?
You know, he used to be a student, right? Yeah, that's why he knows how to inflict maximum pain on us.
I thought all the Nazis were hiding in Argentina.
Stifle it, Tully. You just earned yourself a detention, sir. Being here with you is already one big detention. Son of a bitch, that's another detention.
Do you think I want to be babysitting you? No, I was praying your mother would pick up the phone or your father would arrive in a helicopter or a flying saucer.
My father's dead.
You don't tell a boy that's been left behind at Christmas that nobody wants him? What's wrong with you?
There's nobody here, okay? You stay out of my way, and I'll stay out of yours.
Let me sleep in the Now, most of the kids dislike you, pretty much hate you. Teachers, too. You know that, right?
I find the world a bitter and complicated place, and it seems to feel the same way about me. I think you and I have this in common.
I don't think I've ever had a real family Christmas like this before. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
History is not simply the study of the past, it is an explanation
Of the present. See, when you say it that way and throw in some pornography, it's a lot easier to understand.
I'd like to propose a toast to my two unlikely companions.
Are you trying to lick down my shirt?
No.
Yes.
You're gonna get me fired. This is your Rubicon. Do not cross the Rubicon.
The Holdovers.
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do. Shoot. I did. I clicked out of it. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. So this is from Rotten Tomatoes. From acclaimed director Alexander Payne, The Holdovers follows a curmudgeonly instructor, Paul Giamatti, at a New England prep school who is forced to remain on campus during Christmas break to babysit the handful of students with nowhere to go. Eventually, he forms an unlikely bond with one of them, a damaged, brainy troublemaker played by newcomer Dominic Sessa, and with the school's head cook who has just lost a son in Vietnam, and she is Divine Joy Randolph. And this was a 2023 film, and you can rent it, I guess, but it also is, if you have Peacock, you can watch it on Peacock, which I think they released it at the same time it was in theaters or shortly thereafter. So
Like that.
This is first time watch for both of us because it's brand new. What did you think?
I thought it was great. I enjoyed it thoroughly. One of the things I liked the most about it was beyond this being a period piece, it's set in the 70s. They really went out of their way to use camera techniques of the time, color scheme of the time. The Miramax logo and the Focus Features logo they've got, they've sort of made 70s versions of that. I think there's even something I read online where there's sort of the copyright date is set like it's in the 70s. So they've really gone all the way in terms of trying to make this look like a film shot in the 70s. And I really dug that. I think even down to the length of the shot, the overall pacing of the movie. So I think that the as a film nerd, I love all those things. As an audience member who has been become accustomed to faster shots and a quicker pace. It did feel slow. I think from the trailer, I felt like, oh, this is going to be a kind of a wry coming of age dramedy where there's going to be some bittersweet, but there's going to be some laughs, a la Sideways, which had its pathos but it certainly had its humor, and there was a dash of the outrageous to it. This one felt much more like a drama to me. It's a very sad movie. It's about people who, fundamentally feel really alone in their life for one reason, loss or just lifelong hard knocks, I guess. And so I was a little surprised by the tone. There's moments of levity in it, but they are outweighed by the bigger picture, which is this is really people trying to come to terms with their unhappiness, whether that's depression or grief or whatever form it takes. But the performances are great. And obviously it's able filmmaking. And I thought that it didn't shy away from getting into complex issues, which I liked. And yeah, I don't really have any criticisms of it beyond, while the pacing is true to the 70s filmmaking, point, it did make it feel like it dragged in places as well. What did you think?
Well, I'm going to have to say I couldn't disagree more. I hated this movie.
Did you really?
No.
I was going to say,
I'm joking.
this is going to be an interesting episode.
Yeah, so I think I sent that to you. Probably there was a TikTok about where this guy kind of examined, and I don't know what the TikTok channel is called, but what you talked about with the 70s filmmaking, with the, they do the pans and certain zooms and things like that, and crossfades that have kind of gone out of style. And they were saying that Alexander Payne was that, so many times with period pieces, they really beat you over the head with, this is a period piece and here's the costumes and everything. And like they said, there were a lot of, and we weren't, so this movie takes place in 1970 and I think 1971, maybe it crosses over into.
Like, just to dial in on that for a second, like everything, like every hairstyle is one of the more outrageous hairstyles of the period. Like every car is an iconic car of the period, et cetera, right? Every outfit looks like a Halloween costume from the period, right?
And we were, the two of us were not alive in 1970, but we were alive in the 1970s. And I mean, I don't know about you. I don't really remember much about being alive in the 1970s because we were children. But, so much of what we know about that would be just looking at old pictures or, of course, watching tons and tons of 70s movies.
Sure,
and like
movies
they said,
actually made in the 70s.
Sure.
Yeah.
And like they said in this TikTok, there was, and it's the same thing. We've talked about this before when you watch an 80s movie. And again, we were kids in the 80s, but you'll see people in the 80s movies and everybody's dressed in neon and they have crazy, and it was like, I didn't know anybody who dressed like that. So the same thing kind of with 70s movies is, it's like, was everybody walking around with like huge bell bottoms and great big hair? There would have been just like a lot of regular people like in this movie. So this is, almost the closest thing that I think you're going to see to a time capsule, where other than the fact that we know these are, current actors, if it was filled with people that you'd never seen before and somebody just said, this is just, have you ever heard of this movie, the Holdovers that came out in 1970? And he's like, okay. I mean, it seems that authentic. And we talk so much on this show, I think, because we watch a lot of genre movies, which this is not. We talk, we lament the poor writing in movies so much of the time now. And this movie is so well written, in terms of, you have, Paul Giamatti's character starts out as someone maybe unlikable. The students don't like him. The faculty doesn't particularly, although there are people, there are characters in the movie who like him, but because he's just kind of this hard ass teacher. And as the movie goes on and he develops this bond with this student. So what happens is there are multiple students that get left behind over Christmas. So they're the holdovers.
It's a boarding school.
It's a boarding school. Yeah. And then finally all of the boys except one, this one kid's rich dad comes and picks him up in a helicopter and takes them away. Well, so it's just him and this one kid and the woman who is the head cook, and they're the only people, and the custodian.
Right.
They're the only people who are left. And, over time, as the movie goes on, you see a softer side of Paul Giamatti's character, and you see that, he's not really a bad guy. He's maybe a little elitist and a little pretentious. And, there's some funny scenes with, like, there's a really funny scene where they're in, they go to a bowling alley, but they're doing what's it called, duck pin bowling, where they have the little tiny ball,
or candle pin bowling. I don't remember.
Okay, and he's like sitting at the bar, and there's a guy dressed as Santa Claus, and he's like, "Well, did you know that Santa, your costume is actually not, period specific."
There's a drunk Santa talking with the bartender, and they obviously know each other, and he pontificates
for a couple of minutes, and they just turn and
explains the history of how
they just turn and look. But he's so steeped in this. He went to this boarding school, and he's lived among these, just all these rich kids. So they do as the movie goes on, you find out that he's a caring human being, and he cares about this kid. He cares about the woman who is who's the head of the not chef, but
she's the kitchen.
The head cook.
She's the
yeah. And she is I don't know that I would immediately recognized her if I watched this with my sister and brother-in-law, and they were like, before we even watched the movie, they said, "Oh, the detective or whatever she is from Only Murders in the Building is in it."
Yeah,
it's like, wow. And this is she's a really tough character in that, and she's kind of tough in this. But I think another thing that they do that is really great writing. So she's black, and her son had died in Vietnam. It was recently died, I think. And one of the things that I think that they do that's so great in this, so it's 1970. We know there would have still been a lot of racial problems in the country. And you get the feeling that that's, definitely, and she and the boy and Paul Giamatti travel to Boston. And that there's probably some racial stuff simmering under the surface. Like there's one, he says to the boy, makes some comment about how her son was a student at the school as well. And he just kind of makes an offhand comment about him being treated differently than the other kids. And they don't, but I think in a lesser movie, again, there would have been a scene where they would have been out somewhere and somebody would have used a racial slur or something, but they never do that. You know what I mean?
They do.
And
I do know what you mean.
Yeah, I think that's really, just really, really good writing. And throughout it's like that.
I agree with you. I think that it does, being a elite boys boarding school in New England, Massachusetts, I think, because they go to Boston. Yeah, I guess it could be it felt like Massachusetts to me. I don't know that they nailed it down.
Massachusetts,
but there's definitely, it's set in 1970. There's definitely issues of race. There's definitely issues of class.
Absolutely, yeah.
That come into it. Neither of which are exactly like you say, there isn't a sort of a jewel on a velvet pillow scene where it's like, oh, this is, where we confront that particular nightmare of the age. But it really does take those dynamics into account. And it's really, again and again, more often about the thing that isn't said but that you can kind of feel one character or the other thinking, but having the good taste and the class not to say. Right. And I think that that's all very captured on screen, and it's done in a very believable way. I think that's great writing. I think that's great directing. I do think it's interesting that you have. I was really fascinated by the issues of mental health also, because the boy, it comes down to be kind of a three-hander. I mean, the janitor is there and is a part of it for sure, but we don't learn much about that character in his life. It's mostly about the head cook and the professor and the student. Excuse me. It turns out that the student's father is institutionalized in a mental hospital. And we learn a little bit about that, but that there was a sort of a period of decline. And it wasn't until that his father had a violent episode that he was committed. And now, of course, it starts off, the mother is has a new boyfriend or a new husband. And that's part of why he's being left, I guess, a new husband, because she says, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but, we never got to have a proper honeymoon. So we're going to just have you stay at school so we can have this time together." And guess what? The kid doesn't like it. So at first you think it's going to be divorce. That's the thing in the 70s now that was happening all the time. And that was the hot topic. And of course it is that, but it's more profoundly personal to the boy. He's afraid that he's going to become his father. He's afraid he's going to go crazy like his dad, in addition to missing his dad and feeling maybe like his dad was treated unfairly and he needs to go and see it for himself. So he convinces the teacher to take him to the institution to visit his father. And that's a pretty hard-hitting scene. It's not it resists a number of Hollywood cliches, right? The father is extremely sedated and hence extremely sedate. Right? There's no big fireworks. There's no big revelations. It's just you get to watch this kid lay eyes on this real dad. And I think at the end of it, his dad says something paranoid, like, "I think they're putting something in my food." And it's understated and it's quiet, but he sort of, what goes across the kid's face is left to the interpretation of the audience. But what I took from that moment was, I'm not even sure if he's been listening. I'm not even sure if he knows who I am, actually. Yeah. And there's a shift there to, oh, maybe they locked away my dad because he's difficult, to A, my dad is really insane, and B, am I going to become insane too? And that's a profound shift that happens over time, right? That's a realization that deepens. And again, it's not ever made explicit, and part of I think he has an exchange with Paul Giamatti where he says something skirting that, and we get a reaction shot from Paul Giamatti, which is all in his face, where that panic kind of drops, and he says, "Hey, you're your own man,
You're not your dad.
You're not your dad, and I'm not my dad." From the teacher's perspective, what's really interesting is this is a Harvard guy, went to this school, went to Harvard, and I guess got kicked out of Harvard for some elite shenanigans, plagiarism that the other guy turned around on him. And he was the one being plagiarized, but somehow he got hoodwinked and he got kicked out of school for being the cheater. And sort of the sense you get from Giamatti's dialogue talking about it is that he kind of fled back to the last place that was really felt comfortable for him, and became the kind of unassailable, entrenched, a teacher there, a tenured teacher there, and became a real hard ass, a real prick, really, about academic standards and excellence and sort of kids these days. And I think we spoiled this if you haven't figured that out already, folks. I think by the end, his realization is kind of like, I've been avoiding living my life here. Like, I came here because it felt safe, and I haven't tried to meet another woman. There's a colleague of his that's nice to him, and like in Sideways, there's a moment where he sort of has feelings for her, and then we see that she's not available and his heart breaks. But I mean, all these little chips in the ice where this character, by the end, he falls on his sword for the kid. And again, your typical Oscar bait would make a big fanfare out of that, but that's not really what happened in 70s movies. And so they have a goodbye where it's kind of like, this is overdue. Like, I needed to get out of here. The guy who's my boss, the dean, was a student of mine. I've always thought he was a prick,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not getting any younger, and I'm not really serving myself or anybody else by staying here. I have to go. I think he goes to travel the world. He's a professor of antiquities, so he wants to kind of Indiana Jones it and go see Greece and, all these things he hasn't done. And he's scared, right? And the kid is scared to kind of go through another year with all of this new stuff and without this wingman that he's met over the, not wingman, but kind of the closest thing to a father figure he's got. And that's where the movie ends. And it left me wanting more of their story.
But it's a very, it feels very true to life. That closing shot is just, he leaves, they shake hands. You almost think like they're going to, they're kind of both almost in tears, and you think they might hug, but they do a, firm handshake. And then he drives away, he stops at a stop sign, takes a swig of liquor, and then you just see him pull, and the credit, very 70s like credits go over. And, you think about how many people do, most of us, our lives don't just fall into place like a puzzle, and you talked about the, that there is class distinctions in this film. There's even, he's even subject to that. I mean, he's gone to this elite school, and he went to Harvard, but like you say, he got kicked out. And so he's gone back, probably kind of with his tail between his legs, and he's just a teacher now. And there's the scene where they go to Boston and he runs into the guy.
An old classmate. I don't think that's the same guy. I think that's just...
That is the same guy, yeah. Who was the one who essentially got him kicked out of Harvard.
Oh, I didn't put that together. That was the guy?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, I thought that was just a classmate who he didn't want to...
I could be wrong, but I thought he was the guy, that he... But at any rate, he, he runs into the guy and his wife. And I believe he's teaching it. He's a professor at Harvard, I think. At any rate, he's like super successful. And there's a running thing throughout the film where, Paul Giamatti and the students say that, I forget what the name of the school is, but whatever, men don't lie. And so, he lies to this former, peer of his, that he doesn't want to say that he's gone back to school and teaching. He's traveling the world,
right?
And teaching at these. And then when they walk away, the kid is like, "I thought we don't lie." And he's like, "Well, yeah." And there's more than one scene where they lie for each other, essentially.
There are moments like that throughout that feel.
And again, that's a thing that people do in real life. How many people you run into? Maybe you run into somebody that you grew up with who's super successful.
Yeah.
Like maybe you kind of. You say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he kind of fudge it. What?
Very, very human impulse for sure. But there were scenes like that in the movie that feel like they're trying to be the movie I expected it to be, the more lighthearted coming of age dramedy, where there's just an energy to them that's like, oh, I thought, I don't remember the name of the school, Bartleby or Barton.
Barton, I think it is. Yeah.
I thought Barton men don't lie, and the kid's kind of outraged about it, and the professor's kind of like, oh, tut tut, blah blah blah, right? And that feels different to me than many of the other scenes that are shot as straight drama. I'm thinking the cook, they go to a holiday party, and the cook ends up by the record player playing songs she likes, and she's drunk and maudlin, and there's a sort of they kind of go in to be like, okay, maybe we've had enough, maybe we should get out of here, right? And it doesn't explode, but there's a little bit of a you get your damn hands off of me vibe. and it's all played very understated. It's, we've been in those situations where you're at a party or something and somebody's had too much to drink or somebody's really upset, and you feel like, oh, this is we don't want, this is a grenade that's going to go off. Not nobody's going to get hurt, but it feels like a slice of life moment when feelings are running big in a situation where you're like, this isn't the appropriate time or place for that, but it's happening. And the beginning of the movie has more of the, like, I want to say kind of Dead Poets Society. It's like staged. It just feels more staged. We're meeting the characters. There's elements of Giamatti's character. He's got they call him a walleye. He's got like
a lazy eye.
A lazy eye, yeah. And
I'm sure there's a medical term for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm using they say walleye in the movie. I don't know if that's an offensive term. I apologize if I've offended anybody, but and then he also has a condition that I can't remember the medical name of, but he smells like fish. Like his
I don't know
body,
if that was real or if they made
there is a real condition.
Okay.
There is a real condition where your body can't break down whatever that chemical is, and so you just sort of excrete it through your sweat and your skin and everything, and it's that sort of fish oil smell. Like if you have severe liver damage, your pee is going to smell like fish oil. Go see a doctor.
Yeah.
But I just felt a little bit like, okay, so this guy he's a prick, and he's got a funny eye, and he smells funny, and he's got a big chip on his shoulder. And once we got into the movie, I was thinking to myself, like, when they introduced the fishy smell thing, I was like, this character doesn't need that, right?
No, yeah.
And the character doesn't need the funny eye either. They bring the eye up more. I think on paper it's supposed to make him seem unapproachable as a character, make him see like all the kids hate him, and he's got these things that are easy to make fun of, and et cetera, like old Mrs. Crabapple, right? She can't just be a normal looking person. She's got to look scary and sound scary, and cats disappear in her yard. I mean, it's like there has to be like 8 things.
Yeah.
And you go, but that's not, it's not Lemony Snicket. It's like, the teacher you hate, it's just a prick. There wasn't anything, maybe he had a mole on his face or something, maybe, but there weren't 4 things.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
yeah.
But I mean, I think the movie is super effective and I don't know what order they shot it in, but it kind of relaxes out of that into being like, let's just tell the story of these characters and the real moment to moment stuff. And the other reason I like that is if you zoom out enough, this thing does have a kind of a Good Will Hunting or Dead Poets Society arc to it. It's a coming of age story as they make some valuable realizations about their lives together, and they grow closer. And you certainly could have shot this in a more, holiday movie, kind of a sweet ending, hopeful, bittersweet, and they didn't. And that's one of the things I really like about this film, is that it avoided that set of tropes. Mostly. I think you can still see it in there in a couple of scenes, in that, like, well, I thought Barton, the way that the kid plays that fits like it's trying to meet the Hollywood trope of like mock outrage, instead of any number of other things, like just really dry being like, I guess I'm not the only liar at Barton, or whatever.
I kind of took it. I don't know if this was intentional, but I felt this way watching the movie. That you have for kids. Now, I come from a family of teachers, so I was used to been around teachers my whole life. So I definitely, saw teachers outside of a teaching setting and saw them, as humans. But, I think we've all had that thing when we were a kid where you see your teacher out shopping or something like that, or at a movie or whatever. And it's like, oh, they're a person. You know what I mean? They exist out beyond this. And I felt like that was kind of, and I think it's, now being, in the adult way of looking at it is, teachers and adults say things to kids to try to, that would be a very teacher or adult like thing to be like, hey, we don't lie. That's not something that you do.
Right.
And then in real life, I always think of I have an uncle who went to Notre Dame and got an engineering degree there. And he and my aunt always told their kids that he got straight A's at Notre Dame. And like for years, it was just, yeah, he got straight A's at Notre Dame. And my mom said something about that one time about him getting straight A's. And he was like, what are you talking about? And she goes, well, you always told the kids that you got straight A's. And he goes, I didn't get straight A's. He's like, we just said that to them, so they would study hard. He did well, I'm sure. But you know what I mean? It's that thing of you present something to children, and real life is much more complex than that. The thing, yeah, you don't lie. Lying is bad. We should never lie. And then it's like, oh, I got invited to this party and I don't really want to go. Sorry, I'm sick. Or we don't lie. You know what I mean?
I do.
I don't know if they were trying to convey that but I thought it was very interesting that you don't often, as a kid, there wouldn't often been scenarios like this where you're going to spend several days with a teacher and see them as how they are as a real person, and not just your teacher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And it's interesting because this kid's not 12. He's a senior probably at this school and was held over a year. So he's 17 or 18. I guess he's not 18 yet because they don't let him drink.
Yeah, they don't let him drink.
Which in 1970 or something, I think the drinking age was 18.
I don't think it changed until early 80s.
Yeah, and he's a year.
He kept trying to drink and they wouldn't let him,
So, all of that very interesting. My favorite part was just how technically true they were to the filmmaking preferences and and styles, and the color is amazing. And there's some shots of the set where they show a sink that I'm like, wow, some set designer just had a field day making this look like a 1970s sink.
There's a scene with wallpaper, and my brother-in-law goes, I remember that wallpaper.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know if it was in my parents' house or if it was in a doctor's office. But he's like, I remembered that specific wallpaper.
Well, it made me think a little bit of Wes Anderson, because it did feel like a lot of that stuff was hand-picked and carefully researched. But in a Wes Anderson film, part of it all feels like it's in a jewel case somehow. It all
you never feel like you're in a real world.
No, you feel like you're in a dollhouse that Wes Anderson built, and collected all of this stuff and put it together, and it's in the shot because he loves that thing. And so in some ways, the mounted deer head and the wreath and all of these things are things he loves. Sometimes they get their own cutaway to show you all the things in the room, and other times they're all of kind of equal, weight in the space. This does not do that. I think this has a couple of shots where it leans really heavy into like, we got to show you the sink because this is just too good not to highlight. But for the most part, it's literally the wallpaper is just the paper that's on the wall in that room. And if you stop and look for it, you're like, oh yeah, that's accurate. Or like we talk about the cars, not every single car is a 1969 whatever. It's like, I think his car is a piece of junk, and it's probably
he has to get in
10
on
or
one
12-year-old car.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Time, right? He's driving, so that wouldn't be that would have been a car from the late 50s or 60s. But it's just not like every single thing has the timestamp on it. It feels like it feels like a slice of life.
There was one scene where we were watching it, and it wasn't like I was watching for this, and we were watching it. We watched it at my sister's house, and they have like a 75-inch TV. And there's one scene where they're driving to Boston, and they're driving down a street, and in the background you can see there are 3 cars, and one of them is a Honda CR-V, and like 2 other and I was like, look, there's new cars there.
Yeah.
And they didn't catch it. They're like, oh, rewind it back. And I was like, it's at the top. And that was the only time. I mean, that was the only time in the movie where it broke the illusion for me for just a split second. And I wonder if that was one of those forest for the trees thing where like they had looked at it so many times that they didn't even catch it themselves.
They probably didn't catch it at the time of shooting. And the question you have is,
I don't know if they would have had the budget to digitally remove it.
Or that's not what you want to spend the budget on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you go, well, we caught a continuity error, and the people with the checkbook looked at it and are like, that's fine. We're not going to Greek that out, or we're not going to.
But that was the only time anything,
You caught it when you shot it, but you're like, I really love that take. We'll just frame that out if we need to. And then you look at it framed out and you go, I don't like it being that tight on these two guys. Right. So then you just go, you know what? If they're looking at the car, then they're not paying attention to the performance.
It's very in the background. Yeah. I mean, like I say,
Yeah. I mean, you see that when you're shooting out in the Cotswolds or something like that, and there's a road in the distance, and there's a contemporary, it's supposed to be a swords and sorcery thing, and a little Cooper Mini goes by or something way off in one of those little roads. And you're like, we've got 200 people on horseback here. We can't. If we reshoot this, it's $100,000.
What did you think? I thought that. So I guess the kid, because they in the IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes thing, they said newcomer. So I guess this is his first movie. I don't know. I thought he looked like he stepped right out of the 70s. I mean, he just had, and you see these kids like in an interview, and obviously like I'm sure his hair looks different than that, but I mean, he just seemed spot on a kid from a 70s movie.
Yeah, I thought
he was really great.
I thought it was a terrific performance. Yeah, a little unkempt, spray of acne, insecurity right below the surface, like kind of a kleptomaniac, steals the other guy's cigarettes. That's the first time we meet him, and or steals his porn or something. I don't remember what there was a nudie magazine or cigarettes or something. I can't remember what he stole, but. Yeah, I just thought a terrific performance. And in some ways, you don't have the burden of whatever the last thing you did that maybe you're famous for, people seeing you as that other character. I don't think he's going to suffer that problem. I think whatever he goes on to do next, you change the hair and, you change the wardrobe and everything. I think one of the things that's successful about this performance is I don't know that I could pick him out of a lineup right now. That wasn't really the point. The point was, during the movie, I thought it was riveting, but it wasn't about him being the best looking guy in school, or really wasn't about his looks at all. So from one angle, he's just this sort of forgettable kid, bright, but kind of a squeaky wheel. But,
been kicked out of 3 schools, they said.
Yeah, acting up. And then, just on that note, the other thing I love about this is we end up in a room with the headmaster and the kid's mother and stepfather. Kid's not in the room, but it's a sort of a disciplinary hearing. So we get to meet the mom, right? These boogeymen that left him at the school. And that could have been played with a very heavy hand.
Yeah, they're just people, too.
They're just people. And she seemed, I mean, you could say that sort of really sucks to leave your kid at school over the holidays like that. But she didn't come off as an evil person. I mean, I think she was directed to be and performed a woman who was in love with her husband, and this mental illness thing really came out of left field. She said, we had a really hard time finding the place where he is, and now I got to move him again, right? And you can hear the kind of trauma in that, and she's found this new guy. She's afraid that this baggage with the crazy ex-husband and the possibly, the problematic son, they're going to send him to military school. And it's as much as like, we just can't deal with this ongoing thing as I want to get on with my life. Like, I'm still a relatively young person and I deserve happiness and I want to chase that, right? I'm not defending the mother character for its own sake. She's portrayed as somebody very human that has human failings and human desires and isn't coming from a evil stepmother,
And even the headmaster could have been a cartoony, in the beginning, at the very beginning of the movie, we meet him, and he's upset with Paul Giamatti because he has flunked a kid who I think his dad's a senator. And he's just like, well, I don't care who he is. He didn't do the work or whatever. And he's like, yeah, but this guy's, his dad's a senator. He's sort of like, can you give me a break? He's like, I get it. It's not right. But, and again, it's kind of that thing of having to play within the realities of what real life is.
Yeah.
And you want to, presumably the headmaster is not a bad guy. He's sort of on his side. That's like, you shouldn't pass a kid just because but it's like, we have to keep this place running,
But from Paul Giamatti's character perspective, he literally says to him as he's leaving, is like, you always have been and always will be, penis cancer. In human form. So what you end up is that you realize that Paul Giamatti's character hates this guy and thinks he is human scum. But we see him in 2 or 3 scenes. And while, he argues for like, look, I understand we have to have standards and we can't compromise it, but it's also, this is the real world and this is the politics of higher education, and our money doesn't come from heaven. It comes from donors. And, at least try and meet me halfway. You could have given him a D-, like we could, and Paul Giamatti sort of stands on principle, mostly because he doesn't like this guy. But we don't get to see what he detests so much, because while this guy is sort of a typical whatever in the scenes we see him in, he seems pretty even keel. He seems quite patient with Paul Giamatti's prickliness, and it doesn't come off as pity or, condescension or any of that you see in these other movies, where it's kind of like, okay, well, we're going to do it my way or the highway, right? I mean, in the 80s, these rich, powerful characters were played both as buffoons and utterly ethically bereft, right? They were almost sociopathic in their sanctimonious, self-righteous self-confidence and disdain for anybody that didn't have, the success that they had.
Right.
And I think that we grew up watching that. I think that has always colored
sure.
For a while, it colored my worldview. I'm like, oh, that's what principals are like. I'm like, no, not really.
And you get they do kind of get the Hollywood moment there where when he walks out, and it's a really funny line, because literally as he's going out the door, he says, you've always been and will always be, or whatever, penis cancer. And that's that's a very Hollywood thing where it's like, oh,
zinger.
You get fired or you quit a job and you hate your boss, and on the way out you want to have the perfect one-liner, and there's no rebuttal, you just walk out the door. So they get that kind of Hollywood moment there, and it lands, it's one of the funniest lines in the movie. But
I respect Paul Giamatti. His style, he's I don't want to just hate on Paul Giamatti. It's just like he's almost, I talk about one of the strengths of being an introduced, his kid's a good actor, right? But this is his first thing, so he gets to kind of just be whomever he wants to be in this film. Maybe he's Australian or British. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's utterly transformational. We wouldn't know because we've never seen him in anything before. Paul Giamatti now is just always Paul Giamatti, and I think he's a terrific actor. He is kind of funny looking, and he has a sort of a manner, and he's kind of always doing himself. I found it a little bit distracting. I mean, couldn't even tell you what the character's name is, but I just always saw Paul Giamatti all the way through, and I don't think a funny eye or funny mannerisms change that. I don't know. That's not necessarily a criticism, but
there's an HBO show called 30 Coins. It's Spanish, and it's in the 2nd season. It's a really good show, but it's a horror show, and it's Spanish language, and it's almost entirely a Spanish cast. But Paul Giamatti is in the 2nd season. and he is this and what the show is about. It's the 30 coins that Judas sold Christ for.
Oh,
and they basically have, it's almost
they're
not
cursed.
exactly, but yeah, they're cursed, and they have magical powers. So it's basically all these different factions of people trying to
get it,
to get these coins because they have all these powers. So it's a little bit sort of an Indiana Jones almost, like, but it's a horror thing. And Paul Giamatti is this wealthy, like self-help guru writer guy who's made all this money, and he has some of these coins, and he's trying to get more of them, because the more you have, the more power. And he is very, very evil and scary in this show. So it's a really different performance.
I'd like to check that out.
It's a cool show. It's on HBO. It's on Max. It's I think maybe you would enjoy it. It's really, it's super wild. I don't really know exactly how to describe it, but he doesn't come in until the second season, but it's a crazy show. I mean, they really go, it has kind of an X-Files vibe to it, like sort of starting out, but then a lot of it is this, like the Vatican involved, and there's like evil, priests and all this stuff. It's a fun show.
It sounds more like the Da Vinci Code maybe than
Indiana Jones. But it's a full on, I mean, there's monsters in it and things. So,
wow.
It's all kinds of supernatural. It's a really cool show. But Paul Giamatti doesn't come in until the second season. And like I say, I think you would look at him and now he's chewing up the scenery in this, but he's super evil and,
you astound me,
scary.
Sir.
What's that?
I said, you astound me, sir.
Yeah.
He's chewing the, I mean, that's one of the things I love about Paul Giamatti is he really sinks his teeth in. There was a mini series on HBO called John Adams that he was in with Laura Linney, which I think is terrific. It's a great historical drama miniseries. I think there's just one season, and maybe there's 2 seasons. I don't know, but it's a finite thing, and he's wonderful in it. And he's not doing nebbishy, whatever, New York Paul Giamatti. He's really portraying John Adams, but it's still that dude, and the voice and the mannerisms are there. I don't even know why I bring it up. I just found it a little distracting in this because it felt like he kind of leaned into that, and it's great, but I saw the star, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about, so he has already won a Golden Globe for this, and is I don't think the Oscar nominations have come out yet, but he's probably going to be nominated for this, and Alexander Payne will be nominated for director, and will be nominated for Best Picture. And the Golden Globes do kind of a cake and eat it too kind of a thing, where they have separate comedy and drama categories, which the Oscars don't do. And on the one hand, I think I prefer that it's the best actor, whatever the genre is. But on the other hand, it's not often that they seem to be into comedic performances with the Oscars. You look at like a lot of old films, like 40s, 50s, and 60s. There were a lot of comedic performances that won, and comedy films, but today the Oscars seem to be it's drama with a capital D.
Yeah.
I'm sure Cillian Murphy is probably the odds-on favorite, to win Best Actor. But I think I mean I really like it, Giamatti's performance in this.
Have you seen Oppenheimer yet?
I know we talked about it the other day.
Yeah. I don't like seeing a thing that had. Barbie's another example. I don't like seeing a movie after it's already had such a big
all the hype
forum, hype and just because that poisons my mind for.
Then your expectations are so high.
Well, and they're high and they're not always calibrated right, and then the feeling of that isn't what I expected. That doesn't meet the expectations I had. Is a disappointing feeling. But it is good. It's funny because it's a well-directed film and well-executed film. And it's more exciting than I had the thought near the end. That I'm like, on paper, I'm like,
kind of dull.
This is a kind of a boring, wordy script on paper. Like, we all know what happened. But they managed to make it, and it's a 3-hour movie. So Nolan manages to make it feel like a thriller. I'm like, it, other than a literal bomb, 2 bombs going off, it's not really a thriller. It's a historical drama,
Yeah.
but it's definitely worth checking out.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, ChrisandChrisTalkMovies@gmail.com. That's our handle. We're on the socials here. Maybe you're watching us on the socials. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We're on YouTube. We're on your favorite podcast app. Like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. All that good stuff. Really, we ought to be saying this at the beginning. Aren't we supposed to say this stuff at the beginning?
Yeah, I was thinking, we might want to start it at maybe next
now
time.
That you've listened to us for an hour.
Here's how I guess you found us.
We only want the people who stick it all the way through. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds to me like I would recommend this. Would you recommend this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I'm to just be a little nitpicky. I mean, it's 2 hours and 13 minutes. I think there was definitely a point where watching the movie, we kind of took a bathroom break and we paused it and it was like, and it seemed kind of like it was wrapping up and it was like, oh, there's another hour of this. But
yeah,
I don't really know what I would cut from this. I don't know that there was anything that was really like, that part kind of, it all gels well together. So I don't really know.
Yeah.
But it definitely, as you said, it definitely has that slower 70s feeling to it. So which I wonder younger audiences how that would play for them.
Yeah, I don't know. That would
highly recommend.
That would be interesting to ask a younger audience. I mean, I think part of the nostalgia payoff for you and me is the familiar. There's a recognition of some of that stuff where you're like, oh right, yeah, I remember that. Whereas newer audiences might be like, why is it so slow? Why is the color so weird?
Yeah.
Who knows? I guess if only we could ask somebody, but that can't.
We don't know anybody.
Can't be
yet.
Possible. That would require work.
Right.
All right. Do you have any thoughts on what we should do next time?
So I had suggested to you maybe a week or so ago this Netflix movie that I think it was 2015. I'm going to bring it up here on Rotten Tomatoes, which is called "I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore."
Oh yeah, that looks crazy.
Have you seen it?
Nope. You mentioned it to me, and I did go and watch the.
You watched the trailer?
The blurb for it, and it looks crazy.
Yeah. So, and it is. So it stars Melanie Linsky, which, if you don't know her name, I think you would definitely recognize her. And then Elijah Wood, and there are some other actors in it. And then it was directed by Macon Blair, who. Do you remember we did this? I'm going to say this was probably 2021, Blue Ruin, that revenge movie.
Yes.
So the guy who stars in that, he directed this movie.
Nice.
And he just has a bit part in it. So it has, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil any of it for you, but it has that dark feeling of Blue Ruin, but it's funny also. I mean, it's darkly comedic.
Yeah,
but it's right there on Netflix. So if you would be interested in watching that,
I got that vibe. And I also was reading. So Sundance premiered the neo-noir Love Lies Bleeding. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I was just reading some stuff about that today.
And
which I can't wait for that.
I can't wait for that. That looks so great and so electric. It looks really bonkers. And I think an opportunity for Kristen Stewart to really shine. Like, Kristen Stewart has done some interesting work as her career has continued to unfold. And I think
she's great.
This looks like it's going to be a great addition to her cinematic resume. So I that premiered to acclaim. I think I read a review in Variety that raved, basically was like, this movie's really great. So, we'll be seeing that sometime this year, I think.
Yeah. I hope that plays wide just based on her, name. I don't know if it will or not.
Yeah.
because that's I'd like to see that in the theater.
Yeah.
But I don't feel at home in this world anymore. So Macon Blair, the director of it, also directed, and I think I've sent you the trailer for this, but he directed, or has directed, it's not released yet, but this remake of The Toxic Avenger that looks. Did I not send you the trailer?
I don't remember. Send it to me again, or I
will.
Look it up.
So, and we've talked about this before. Like, I've never really cared much about Troma, and I think you're sort of.
I've never even seen the original. That's how little I really care about it.
But it's him directing it, and Elijah Wood is in that. I think Elijah Wood plays the main bad guy or one of the bad guys. It's so funny
because I just watched Lord of the Rings with Nova, so like I've got.
Oh, okay.
And we were talking about emo Frodo, like when the ring starts to affect Frodo, he gets there like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't like emo Frodo. And she laughed. She's like, I don't either. I'm okay with happy Frodo, with friendly, for sweet Frodo, but emo Frodo bugs me.
But so Macon Blair is the director of that, and it I'll send you the trailer, but it seems it's really intriguing because it's like you take this really low budget
property,
concept, and and it's a bigger budget. I mean, they're still trying to. I think they're kind of like trying to purposely make it look kind of cheap.
Yeah.
But these guys do good movies, so it's I'm really curious as to how the Toxic Avenger is from Game of Thrones.
There are many people.
I know, but
Jon Snow, like
no.
Ned Stark.
No, give me just one second.
I'll just look it up. Everybody's listening to us type.
Peter Dinklage.
Oh,
so Peter Dinklage is the Toxic Avenger.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, which is hilarious. So I'll send you the trailer. It's definitely one I'm super intrigued about because it just seems like such a bizarre.
Yeah.
Just a bizarre, but I mean, I think it's fairly, it's not like they did it for $1 million or something. I mean, I think it's a legitimate budget.
No, but I like that makes me think of, but again, here's Elijah Wood again no, that was Harry Potter. Was the Weird Al Yankovic story. Like how gonzo that was. Like it was a send up of Hollywood but it got so meta and so inverted. Like the scene I'm thinking of, I mean, the pool scene where he does another one, rides the bus, is my favorite scene in the movie. But with all those cameos and everything. But there's a scene in which he is wearing Michael Jackson's leather jacket, basically, and he's furious because within the movie, the premise is that he wrote fat.
Yeah,
he's like, I finally write an original piece, and this guy, he doesn't need to knock off my songs. Like as though Michael Jackson was having a hit with Bad, then Fat came first. And it's played straight. Like it's like he Weird Al in the film is furious that
and I love, with both of those guys, with Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe, their careers are kind of similar because they were both child stars and starred in gigantic franchises, and now apparently have enough money that they could just do whatever they want. And they could, there have been some rumors with Daniel Radcliffe that, whenever they reboot Wolverine, that like he would be Wolverine. And he said, he's like, I don't look anything like Hugh Jackman, and, but he's like, it's flattering that people think that I could play Wolverine. And he was also considered for the Moon Knight show. And he basically has said, I did one giant franchise. I don't want to be locked into another one.
Right.
And that's so cool. I think that it's just, he's just going to do what he thinks is interesting. And the same thing with Elijah Wood,
And they
just do these weird movies.
It is weird, but whether or not they get big box offices or big even audience,
they're making money.
They're critically acclaimed. I think what's nice about them is, you've got to be Tom Hanks big or Will Smith big in Hollywood to have a studio feel like just having you attached to it will guarantee that the movie opens.
Mm-hmm.
That is a kind of power in Hollywood wielded by very few people. But if you're Daniel Radcliffe, just being attached to a project probably is enough to get it funded. Whether you have to crowdsource it or whatever, like people are going to want to see you're a household name. So I mean, there is a power to that in terms of being someone who's got the mindset of an independent filmmaker that's like, I want to do interesting stuff that's really a passion project and feels fun to do and feels really different and offbeat and maybe a little risky, maybe a little experimental. He's in an amazing place because he was Harry Potter,
Yeah.
And I mean, unless he was foolish with his money, I think he's set for life.
I think he's pretty conservative in terms of, I don't think he's the guy who's going and like buying Ferraris and stuff, And the same with Elijah Wood, I think. I think they're both pretty normal guys. I don't know about Daniel Radcliffe, but Elijah Wood has his own production company. I know he's tried, one of the things famously, he's tried to get the rights to Nightmare on Elm Street, because I guess he has like a pitch for something that he would want to do, with that. But, and of course there's they're confused for each other so much. And I've heard in interviews where they'll like sign autographs as the other guy, but there has to have been talk of trying to get them into a movie together, which would be a lot of fun.
It would be. They could play brothers. Yeah, they could play brothers for sure.
But yeah, is that one cool for next time?
I think so. I'm excited to watch that. I'll watch that one of these evenings.
I think it'll be an interesting conversation.
The tone of it, just watching the trailer, the tone of it seems very interesting to me.
It's got a little of that Coen Brothers kind of feel because it's, they've done so much stuff that is bumbling criminals, and this is that kind of thing, which I know I've texted
still dangerous.
You about.
Like they
dangerous.
Really managed to thread that needle where the criminals can seem disorganized, bumbling, even ridiculous, but the violence feels real and scary. And they managed to wed those things together. Rachel hates it. She doesn't like the violence.
Yeah.
She feels like it's a little bit of a bait and switch. Like oh, look at these buffoons. And then they really hurt someone. And that's upsetting and made more upsetting because you feel lulled into it. And I don't feel like it's that. I think that it's whether or not they consciously have this thesis. To me, what I love about their movies is that it underlines the absurdity of violence itself. That it's just a horrible waste, right? And I don't think they're peaceniks or whatever. But I think that they do want to highlight the absurdity of violence. And when you're in a violent situation, how otherworldly and how just strange and unreal it feels, I think they managed to capture that really well.
And very much along that line, even though it's their original creation, even though I don't think they really have too much to do with it now. I know I've texted you briefly about this. The new season of Fargo is fantastic.
Yes, you have said that a couple of times,
and it's definitely violent. So I don't know that Rachel would enjoy it, but it's still it's very much that tone of the movie. And I don't know if you've watched any of the other seasons.
I haven't, but season by season is a different story, right? It's different.
It's
different
completely
people.
Completely different actors. I mean, I don't know if they reuse any of the same people or not, but it's different actors, completely different story. It's the same showrunner every time.
All set in Fargo. Each story is another thing.
Well, not exactly. I mean, it's sort of this one's kind of in and around there, but it's not exactly Fargo. But man, I mean, I would be surprised if you don't love it. I mean, I would, you could just watch this new season and then you can go back and watch the other ones. One of the,
they're not dependent. One's not dependent.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I've only seen the first season, and that one's really good. But there's one season is Ewan McGregor, and he plays twins. But I mean, this one is just, I mean, production, writing, acting. I mean, it's just great. I mean, it's one of the best.
I've heard
one of the best things I've seen on TV.
I've heard people compare it to Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. They're like, if you liked those shows, you're doing yourself a disservice by not watching Fargo. And there's 3 seasons of it now, right?
I think it's this is the fourth or fifth.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
And they play around with time frames. This one is modern day, but the one prior to this was in the, which I've not seen, is in the 40s or 50s, and Chris Rock is the star of that one. But it has Jason Schwartzman in it.
Huh.
And, you know, I get this newest season is John Hamm. He's this like evil sheriff guy in it. I mean, he's real bad and scary. You know, I mean, you would love it. It's awesome. I mean, this newest, I haven't finished yet because they just released the last episode, I think this week, and I'm a couple episodes behind. But I mean, I watched, and I'm not a big, you know, we talked about this before. I'm not a big binger, and I think I watched 4 episodes the first night. You know, it's like 4 hours. I just sat there, it's like, oh, I'm gonna watch another one. You know, that thing where you stay up till
I do
1 o'clock in the morning or
I
whatever.
can't handle it anymore. Like I have stuff I have to do in the mornings, and it's like it ruins me. But
yeah,
I do still fall prey to it from time to time.
High recommendation, and also that 30 coins. I think you would. I mean, it's wild, but and it's really high production values too. That's a really interesting show. So, all right,
we are at time. So, unless you have anything else you want to add, I think
we
that
covered a lot.
We'll call it, and we're going to watch I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore for next time. Join us on that, and that's on Netflix.
It is on Netflix.
Nice.
Yes.
So if you have that subscription,
I presume they haven't taken it off. It's a Netflix. You know, it was made for Netflix.
Yeah.
So,
then Chris and I will talk to you all next week.